Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all joining us live today. Thank you for taking the time to be part of Strategy and Performance webinar series. And for those that are meeting me for the first time, I'm Guilherme Barbassa, Actio's CEO, and I'll be your host for today's session. At Actio, we offer a platform that integrates strategy, performance, people, process, and risk. Today's session is going to be all about risk management and how it can get caught up in the SaaS sprawl and can get fragmented through the organization and what can be done about it, right? If this is your first session, welcome. This webinar is part of an ongoing series where each month we focus on a different management topic and take a deeper dive to look at it. We like to keep it a varied format. So sometimes we invite a guest speaker, sometimes we share a customer case, and other times we take you inside the platform with a live demo. Today is a demo session, so you'll get to see Actio in action in this webinar right after we talk with our guest, right? If you missed previous sessions and you're curious about them, no worries. We can send them to you afterwards, or you can see them in our YouTube channel. A quick reminder, we have a dedicated community space for risk management professionals. It's a perfect place for you to share your insights, learn with peers, and continue the conversations beyond this webinar. Okay? If you haven't joined yet, we'll share the link in the chat. I highly recommend you connecting there. So the link will be in the chat soon. You can sign up for the community with that link. About questions, we would like to interact with you throughout the webinar. So you can drop your questions in the chat at any time during the session. I'll be keeping an eye on it and bringing your questions or comments to the webinar. You can also use the Q&A segment within Teams. So I'll be keeping an eye on both the Q&A session and the chat, right? And we love when people interact, so please do so. Before you leave, in the end of the webinar, we ask you to fill out a short survey, just a feedback form, so that we can improve our webinars always, right? This is important for us to know what went wrong, what could be done better. With that, it's my pleasure to invite Jerusalem Bello. She's an innovation consultant in Actio and has implemented risk management solutions in many organizations. Welcome, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Guilherme. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure to have you here in our webinar and share a bit of your experience with our audience. So I mentioned a little bit before I shoot out a question for you. We talked a little bit about, the underlying topic of the webinar, that is the SaaS sprawl, right? So we see this as a new problem in many organizations where the employees get so many interfaces, so many softwares that they have to interact with, that they don't know where to do it. They don't know where to update their action plans or mitigation plans and where to look for an information, because the number of softwares which they have to interact with has grown exponentially through the years, right? We have some data from Gartner about that. In 2015, not so long ago, organizations had on average 8 SaaS solutions. On 2022, just 7 years later, they had 130 SaaS solutions on average to interact with. This number has gone down 18% since 2022, not because people are having less SaaS softwares, but just broader SaaS softwares, right? So the SaaS budget has continued to grow, but organizations are looking for softwares that do more, to substitute 2 or 3 SaaS softwares that are specialized in one little part of a management system, and provide one software that integrates that natively. And that's where Actio is, right? We offer a platform that integrates whole knowledge spheres, let's call it, of strategy and performance, risk management, people management, and process management in one single platform, avoiding having to interact with many separate and isolated or fragmented softwares, or having the effort to try to integrate all that, which when we see 130 softwares in an organization is practically impossible, right? So focusing on risk management. Risk management does interact with strategy, performance, people, processes, but it is an ecosystem within itself, right? Jerusalem, when we talk about integrated risk management, what are the main areas you're actually trying to bring together?
Okay. Thanks, Guilherme. So when we're talking about integrated risk management, it can mean different things depending on the organizations, but at its core, it's mainly connecting areas such as enterprise risk management, internal controls, compliance, audits, operational loss, like business continuity, cyber risk, legals, and governance, right? So it has multiple functions under it, but the important thing is the connection between them. So each one of them have their own purposes and responsibilities. So the value is when it comes to understanding the relationship between them. So if you look at the risk management, so you have a risk that's going to have several controls, and these controls are going to be assessed regularly. And you might have like an incident and an operational loss, right? And this could tell us about whether our controls are working or not. And the audit finding may reveal another weakness. So it's all about like having the information come together in order to understand the main risk that the company is exposed to.
Okay. Right? It's quite diverse, right? It has many different aspects to it, but yes, it should be one single integrated risk management model, right? And not separated business practices with different departments or different or disconnected between themselves. That's the approach, right? Yes. Jerusalem, how are these areas typically managed in organizations today? And where do you see the biggest disconnects in all of the experience you've seen throughout all of the organizations you've been implementing, these solutions? Okay, so what I've seen is that, so the problem isn't necessarily when it comes to each one of these function, but about them being managed poorly, but it's about the connection between them. So the organization can still have a very strong internal audit, right? A robust ERM system and even an established compliance, but they can still have a fragmented view of their risks, right? So each function have its own methodology, like different teams, owners, a reporting cycle, like different spreadsheets, and even different systems, right? So everyone could be doing their job, but the information may not necessarily be connected. And there is actually an interesting study by KPMG that's called Beyond Silos,
right? It's titled like Collaborating Across Risks and Internal Audits to Tackle Interconnected Risk. So in this article, what they pointed out was their main challenges are related to fragmented ownership, different frameworks, and siloed system. Right? And 40% of the professionals that they have interviewed said that the main challenge they have is the lack of integrated system and risk data sharing. Right. So I think the important distinction to make here is that the problem isn't the lack of information, but the fragmentation of the information that they have.
Very interesting. So if anyone wants to get the full study, please write us, and we're going to send you this KPMG study, which tackles this same problem we're talking about today, right? Well, one thing is to know the problem is there, and the other one is to get it solved, right? So what does it take to move from a separate or segregated risk management process to a genuinely integrated model?
Okay, so technology is a part of it, but the first thing is that having an integrated risk management model in the first place. So you need to have some common foundations first. So we mentioned like the main challenge. So we need to tackle that first. So there needs to be clarity on ownership and accountability, and we need to have enough consistency in the terminologies that we're using, and also the risk taxonomy. Right. And so one of the challenges that we also talked about is the siloed system. So there needs to be a clear understanding of how information should move from one process to another one. Right. So it's basically about the information flow that is really important, right? So if you take an example of if there's like an incident that occurred, that data doesn't needs to be shared with the risk owner. So let's say if there's the control assessment that shows that key control is not being effective, that should be reflected in the residual risk assessment. Right. If there's like a finding from internal audits, if there's any weakness, so that needs to be part of the underlying risk management team. So what we should be focusing is more on first building the model for having an integrated system and relying on technology to support that.
Okay. So, well, as I promised, today is a demonstration of how to do it, right? If you may, Jerusalem, let's jump into it and see in practice how these parts come together in an integrated model of risk management with all of these moving parts that you mentioned, right?
Okay. All right. So, but before I jump, I just want to give a quick recap. So we talked about how different areas of risk management connect, and importantly, how information from one area influences another area, right? But before I jump, I just wanted to give you a quick mental map of what we're going to see. So first, I'm going to start by showing you like what are we exposed to, right? By answering your question, what are we exposed to, which will be like how we're going to look at the risk, how they're structured, analyzed, and evaluated. And the second point would be what are we doing about it, right? This is where we'll be looking at the risk mitigations and the controls. And the third would be are those controls actually working? This is we'll be taking a closer look at our risk reviews, risk self-assessment, control reviews, control self-assessment, and control testing. Right. And the fourth point is that what is independent assurance telling us? So where we'll be seeing, our audit findings and how that relates to our risk management. And lastly, what are the actual events telling us? So we can have like an operational loss, and what that happens, how that information feed into our risk management, right? So this is what the structure that I will follow. So let's jump into the software. Okay. So first, I'm going to start by having an organizational view. Here we have a dashboard. So this is just one example where I have created a dashboard by risk process, right? So you see the risk analysis that shows a heat map of both inherent and residual risk. So this shows us whether we have the risk, but how the effectiveness of the controls are affecting our residual risk, right? So if I click here, it's interactive. So I see how that my residual risk has, or my control effectiveness has affected my residual risks, right? So, and I can see what those risks are. And so we can create different type of analysis here. So you have like the risk distribution by different departments or processes, like the risk levels. And it's also possible to include like qualitative reports, adding comments to our dashboards, right? So every time that we wanted to present to the board, like if there's anything that's qualitative, it can also be included in our dashboards. And if there are like any main risks that we wanted to closely monitor every time, so we can add that here, get just a managerial level view of what the risk levels like, the mitigation plan, and the controls for each one of them. Right, so this is where we can highlight the main risks and then the status of the mitigation actions and what those are. So you can create different kind of dashboards or reporting to have like consolidated view and analyze our risks, controls, and the status of our residual risks. Okay. So this is an organizational view, but let's go into an impacted item, because organizations can have different way of structuring their risks, right? So for example, for manufacturing, they want to see their risk based on processes and assets, like other organizations may prefer to see their risk based on their strategic objectives, projects, or contracts, right? So this is how they can create the process first and then see how that's consolidated. So you can see the risk exposure at different level. So if we take a closer look at one of the items that I have here, the process, it can go down into deeper levels, breaking it down, the process into compliance, environmental management, financial, and you can also take a deeper view in each one of the process. So this shows me the entire risk exposure, right? Who is responsible, and if there's like any financial impact, and how it is after I apply my controls, right? The residual financial impact represent that. So for each one of them at each level, I can see that which part of the organization has the most risk exposure.
Yeah, this is very interesting, Ursun, because here you can see like it's one issue with risk management is reporting, and seeing how these many risks throughout the organization consolidate so that you can report not individual risks, but let's say segments or areas, right? And what aspect of risk should be looking for, or the board should be aware of. So this gives you a very good consolidation of, where are the risks, be it major individual risks or just a consolidation of small risks that can actually represent a big impact in the organization, right? This is a very interesting view.
Okay, that's correct. So let's take a closer look at one of the items that I have here, account receivable. So I can see what those risks are. So first I saw the consolidation, but then now I wanted to understand, okay, what are the risks that I have that are impacting my specific process, account receivable. So there are these two risks, and this gives me a managerial view of my risk. So here is the risk level. So both the inherent and residual are the same. I can see my controls and the mitigation actions, right? So similarly here, for each one of them, I can see the risk exposure. So this is just a snapshot, but for each one of them, we can investigate further by opening all the items that are registered for this specific risk, right? So I opened one of them, which is customer payment default risk. First thing I see is that I have these two charts that shows me how my how my risk evaluation has changed over time, right? I can see the evolution and whether I have my risks and whether they are under the tolerance or appetite of my organizations. So just give me this highlights. And here is where I add the main information about the risk. So this is where I establish the governance around this risk. So which area that it sits under, who's responsible, what risk matrix am I going to use to evaluate this, what's my tolerance like, right? And whether it's something that I wanted to evaluate monthly, quarterly, like, so this is going to rule how I'm going to manage my risk, right? And after I do that, I can understand, investigate further on my risk. This is a bow tie analysis that shows me what could potentially cause my risk and what could be my consequences. And my controls are already linked here. So I can see that which part of my risk that this control is going to affect. Okay. So this is where we list them. Okay, there is an interesting thing that we have in the software. So this is the AI integration. So at different touch points in the software, we have AI that help guide the users and also help them generate insights. So this is one interaction touch point where it could help the user in identifying causes. So what it does is it's going to look at all the data that you have in the software, not just that, but if there's like any historical information, SOPs, financial data that is not part of the software, we can train the AI so that you would have more contextualized response, right? Because for AI, in order to have a good result, you usually need to train it well with your information. So this is going to be a very safe and secured AI environment for companies where they could use AI without the risk of being exposed, right? So I see that already gave me a few suggestions. So it's very simple. I'm just going to go and add it here, right? Because I'm the expert, right? Not the AI. So it's not just going to be automatically populated. All right, so similarly for how it helped me map my causes, it can also do same thing for my consequences, controls, and also at different touch points, you can have support from AI, right? So, all right, so here is where I have my control. So we're talking about integrated risk management, right? So this is where we're linking our risk with our control environments. So I see that type of risk that I have and the control effectiveness, right? And this is going to help me understand my residual risk. All right, so let's look at how we can do the risk score, like the risk evaluation. So because I'm saying that it's not a static exercise, it's going to be ongoing because I said that I wanted to monitor or evaluate this risk every month. So let's do that together. Okay, so this is how it's been in the past. I see the evolution. Okay. And here's where I can add the severity and the probability of this risk. So the severity, it's not one dimensional. So we're saying that we wanted to analyze the impact of my risk from financial, legal, brand, operational perspective, right? So it's possible to do that. And also if you just have like one dimension, it's also possible just to add the severity. But in this example, we've selected to use multiple dimension to help us assess the impacts, right? And for probability, I could just add it here and I've evaluated that. So since we're saying that's something that's an ongoing, the left side shows me my previous evaluation. So I can compare that and side by side and fill in the new information, okay? So now it shows that it's 9. I want it to be very high. Okay. And I have my controls, and now I see that's its impact on my residual risk. So it's still like high, high, and low, but then it's high and very low, right? This is the results of my controls. So the residual risk, you can see that it has gone down to 8, right? And I can decide on how to treat this risk. So whether to accept it or create mitigation plan. Okay, so I've completed this evaluation. I'm going to save it.
So you're showing here a typical, let's say, risk management process, right?
Yes.
But all of those other areas that we talked about, business continuity, auditing, all of those parallel processes that are adjacent to risk management and should be connected, you're still going to show how these things bridge, right?
Yes.
Just to calibrate expectation here on our audience.
Yes. So right now I showed that how we integrated risk management with controls. We're still going to see like how we can manage the controls separately, but now we're looking at integrating my risk with my controls. But yes, eventually we'll move to audits and how we can even understand our operational loss. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right, so we said that we want to treat this risk. So, and if we wanted to create a mitigation plan, this is how we can manage it from the software. So you can set a timeline, assign who the responsible person is going to be, and the software is going to help you monitor or track the status of your mitigation plan. Right, so it's not just going to be something that just sits there. So the idea is that we also wanted to involve people in this risk management process, people from different business units. So they're going to have access to the tool and they're going to go and update the information, go into the software and see what's expected of them, like from different function. Maybe they can have activities from risk mitigation. They could be something from controls, or even audits, like because when the user goes into the tool, they're going to be able to see all the actions, right? But this is one view where you have all the actions from like to help you mitigate your risks, right? So this is a Gantt chart view. It's possible to have like a Kanban where you have the different columns representing the different status. And as you make a progress, you could update the cards by moving from one column to the others. Oh. Okay, so we have gone through the life cycle of risk management, right? Where we said that where we identified the risk, created the risk analysis, updated the risk evaluation, and created a mitigation plan. Okay, so after that, like let's now go into the next step, which is like how are we going to check whether our controls are working, right? So right now what we are focused on was on risk, but now let's go into controls, right? So this is where you have your controls registered, right? For each one of your controls that you can have like risk indicator that are connected to it, right? This is going to trigger that your risk controls, and it's going to tell you whether your controls are being like compliant or not, right? And your risk reviews, that you can do that. So I see that this control is linked to different risks, and I can assess the control effectiveness every time and say whether it's compliant or not compliant. Because we're saying that risk management or this control, it's not static exercise. It's something that needs to be updated every time. So this is how you can do your control reviews. And so this is from risk management side, but we wanted to involve the people who are close to the controls to do this assessment as well. So we have a feature that supports that, the control self-assessment. So this is how you can allow or involve the people who are executing the controls to assess whether this control is being effective or not, right? Because it's one thing designing an appropriate control at the start, but things could change, right? People change, the process could change, even the risk could change. So you have to do like a regular assessment of your controls, like you have to review them, right? Not just that, but you would also want it to test, especially for important risk. You want to make sure that you have evidence that you wanted to have an evidence that the control is working. So this is where you can do your control tests, right? So like you wanted to update an attachment and here, and then you can add your comments and add all the information in order to help you do the control test.
Okay. So here we were talking about like risk management, and within risk management, there is a series of controls that you establish on top of your risks. And what I'm seeing here that you're demonstrating is that there's a whole ecosystem of processes to manage your controls, right? And these processes shouldn't be, again, disconnected from the risk management structure, because we see that sometimes in some organizations, internal controls manage controls, and risk managers treated as a different department in a whole different process, right? These things are connected, and they should be integrated in the same platform here, right?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. So so far we have seen our risk management and how we can link them with the controls, as he mentioned. And now let's go into the fourth step that we talked about. What is independent assurance telling us, right? What's our third line of defense is going to look like? So this is where we come and add our audits. So this is where we manage our audits in one similar platform, right? So this is where you add, so this is going to establish how you're going to govern your audits. So what it's going to be about, who's responsible, and when you're going to execute it, right? And for different, you can create like different kind of audits here and create the timeline and so on. And once you do that, you can have the conclusions, right? And then create the checklist to help you execute your audit, right? So here, like I have a list of questions. I can go every time and say that, okay, whether it's compliant, non-compliant, and add any evidence and justification for each one of the questions, right? So without going to another platform, I'm doing everything in one place, right? So this is where you can do your audits. Once you're done, you could just save it. And I'm going to go back, right? And at the end, you're going to have your audit findings, right? So this is where you can add that. And based on this, you can create an action plan, right? So this will help you have a centralized system or for all your actions, right? So this is one place where you can register based on your finding the different actions. Right? So similar to what we did in the mitigation plan, you can have the same thing for your audits.
And then again, all of the audits come out with a series of actions to be implemented. Here, you can do it in the same platform, right? Not different platforms, one for mitigation plans, one for controls, and another one for audits, where if you have a action list in under your responsibility, here it's all in one single list where you can just one action can be coming from a mitigation plan, another from executing a control, and another one from some audit that established that you have to, implement some control or some other action that is established. It's not dispersed, right? You can see it all in a single screen, a single platform. This is one of the points of not letting the fragmentation of software break down your information process and or your information flow, and multiply the number of softwares and apps that the employee has to interact with to get the job done, right?
And now let's move on to operational loss, right? So this is where we're going to see what an actual event actually tell us, right? Whether our controls, having registered a loss is what's going to tell us whether our controls are working or not, right? So we have, this is, let's say an event happened where we have some loss, right? Which cost us like 12,000. And you see, this is where we add like, okay, when it occurred, right? And which team was responsible and what kind of analysis that I want to do. So you can create different analysis for your different type of losses, and you could evaluate that in the software. Right, so let's do that. So I have one operational loss, which is duplicate vendor payments. And this is the analysis that I created. So I have like a series of questions that I need to answer in order to help me understand what happened. So this is ask the question like, okay, what was the cause? Right? If it's connected to any risks or control, is it something like in a one-time event or not? Was there any other impact other than a financial, right? So I can create add a detailed analysis, and after that I can create an action plan, right? So that's going to help me correct this operational loss, and this action plan is going to have a responsible person, specific timeline for execution, right? So if you've noticed that we always have things to respond to from our controls, from our risks, from our audits, and even like from our operational loss. So all of them are going to be in one system. Okay. So this is what we have for integrating our operational loss into our risk management platform. Okay. So is there anything you want to add to Guilherme?
No, there are some other aspects of integration that we talk about, like not only on the risk management ecosystem, but how does risk integrate with the strategy and performance? How does risk integrate with people or processes or document management? So can you give us a glimpse of, let's say, beyond risk, right? How does risk connect with these other aspects of corporate management as a whole?
Okay. Okay. Before I do that, let me just give them show them the screen that gives the user's view, or like the employee's view of the software, right? So this is where, as a user, I'm going to have a consolidated information that concerns me. This is my personal workspace. So it shows me like how many risks that I have, if there's like any pending reviews from controls that I need to execute, if there's like a delayed actions, all the actions in my area, right? Because we have been registering so many actions like in different places, and as someone, as an employee who's involved in different things, I wanted to see all my actions or all my responsibilities in one place. So this highlights that, like this is where I get that information. So this calendar highlights the important dates. So I could see that if there's like anything I have to do by specific timeline. Right. And also if I have any access to dashboards, like this is how I could even easily navigate to see the data that I want. Okay. So coming to your question, to giving you a view beyond risk management, right? So as Guilherme mentioned, our tool is not just about risk management. It incorporates different management methodologies such as risk, bonus, people performance, and project management, right? So I'm going to go to our risk strategy management solution to show you how you can see your risk impacts your overall company objective. Okay, so this is going to be a strategy map. This is one type of map, ESG. I wanted to show you another one, imbalance scorecard. Okay. So you can create different kind of visual that you're used to communicating with your team. So, but this is just an example that we have. All right, so you're going to see a strategy map from perspective of financial, client, internal process, and learning and growth. So you see the objectives and how they are performing. So the red shows where it needs my immediate attention, right? So there's a huge goal deviation here. The green shows that things are going according to plan, and the yellow shows there's a slight deviation. So by just looking at a glimpse, I see where I stand in terms of achieving my objectives. So, but this is a very high level view. Let me deep dive and understand if there's like any indicator, projects, or even risks that is connected to this specific objective. So that's where I'm going to see, right? Because the idea is that we're always saying that you need to have a holistic view of your organization. So this is where you could have that. So here, one, for this objective, I see that I have two indicators that influence it, EBITDA margin and EBITDA. There's a project, portfolio of projects, and I see that I have one risk, right? So this risk is something that is registered in my risk management platform, but I'm seeing how that, or which objective that it's going to influence. Right, so you can also have risk related to your projects, so you can always see them together.
Okay, so risk management, again, not isolated in its own department. It integrates with other corporate processes, like you demonstrated here, strategy management, right? So if I'm looking at strategy, and there's a risk connected to a strategic objective, for example, I will be able to see that risk while I'm analyzing my strategy and understand the opposite as well, right? I can see from the perspective of risk management what it impacts that you showed us earlier, what strategic objectives each risk impacts, or what KPI or strategic initiative or project, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Very good.
So for each one of the risk, so this is just a managerial view, right? But at any point, if you have any question about what we are doing about the risk, you can always like open it and understand, analyze the risks, look at the evaluation, how it has been doing in the past, right? And if there's like any mitigation actions, that you can view all of that at any point, right? So we are giving you a comprehensive view of the objective, the portfolio for projects, KPIs, and risks that are interconnected in one screen, or even controls.
Okay, very, very interesting. And can you talk a little bit about document management and the controls and let's say standardization of controls, and how these things come together in document management and risk management within the organizations?
Okay, so we have feature that supports a document management. Okay, so let's open one of them. Right, so this is okay, where you add the basic information, right, and where you set the rules that govern it. So this is where you can view the different versions that you have. So at any point, you can come and create a specific version, and this document can be attached. You can extract it from different sources, right, in your organizations. And once you have that, you can always create a relationship, right? So this is, you can always attach them based on how the structure that you created here in your document structure, and you can have that.
Okay. So if you have a operational standard for executing a control within risk management, you can have the document that details that execution or that standard and all of the versions and the approval levels for when you have to change one of those standards, or if you have a compliance, a document that formalizes, a compliance procedure. You can also have it here with all of the approval workflows and versions and controls of your standard within the organization, right? It's one of the cogs, let's say, within risk management, but then again, it connects to a whole standardization policy and procedure in the organization. This is something that is very useful to, again, not segregate and have many, let's say, document management parts, right? Because you'll have operational procedures, standards and policies. You'll have HR, people management, process management, even documents related to projects and KPIs. If that is within each of these segments, and these segments have different softwares, you'll have documents spread out throughout your organization in many many apps and softwares. Right here, all of these corporate processes that depend on document management can be centralized and aggregated in one single place, right? Which I think is very interesting. Go ahead.
That's correct.
Just our audience, if you have any questions or any points that you would like to see, please leave your comments here on the chat, and then we can address it and tackle it. If you wish to use also the question and answer feature here in Teams, feel free to do so. I'm keeping an eye on both of these. And before you go, please remember to fill in here the feedback form so that we have your perception of our webinar and can improve on next sessions. Sorry, Ruslan, go ahead.
No, I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Right, so we said that we're going to look at, when you talk about organization risk, start by looking at our risk management, where we do our risk analysis and risk evaluations, right? And then we talked about how we wanted to respond to our risks, right? The risk mitigations and the controls. And we took a closer look at whether the controls are actually working or not, right? By doing like the risk reviews, risk self-assessments, and risk testing, right? And then we looked at our audit feature that highlights the independent assurance that we have that give us a different perspective into our risk management. And then we talked about whenever we have an operational loss, how we can connect that to our controls, and how we decide to respond to it. Right. So we have looked into integrated risk management from these angles, like for now. And on a broader term, we also saw that how we can connect risk to our company objectives and other management spheres, such as like our projects, even like our KPIs, right? So, well, that's what we offer in Actio, right? An integrated platform for corporate management practices.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Islam, for let us getting a glimpse here and sharing your experience. And for our audience, I hope I see you in our next webinars. And thank you very much for participating.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Islam.
All right.
Bye-bye.